Oh, that's what's up. So, what's up, Pat? It's been a while. We talked not that long ago, actually, but really cool to chat with you as always. So, how you been? How's life? What's going on over there?
Yeah, life is going pretty good. Enjoying the holiday season. It's a lot more normal of a holiday season than it was last year, obviously, with everything that's
Yeah,
going on. So I've been trying to cherish that every minute I could. I won't go into too many details, but a possible new full-time job might just be within reach. I know I'm one of the finalists for one particular job, so like I said, I won't go into too much right now, but yeah, fingers crossed. And I'm kind of hoping that all gets resolved, around in the new year. So I could just kind of enjoy the holiday season now and then I can go into working. And I think that's probably how it's going to work out, regardless with the way things are going. So yeah, overall, can't complain, man. I really, really can't. And I'm just really bummed that we have an MLB lockout because Lord knows when this lockout is going to resolve itself. So, but you got to
yeah,
take everything else, and just, enjoy everything that's going well. So that's what I'm doing right now.
yeah, definitely. So that's cool to hear that you might have some good news on the job front. I know that's never fun trying to figure that out. So awesome to hear that you might have some good news there. But yeah, you hit on it. The baseball lockout is not ideal, and as long as baseball can get back to just get things going again before spring training, that's ideal. Hopefully sooner than later, obviously. But so I'm not super stressed out about it right now, but who knows how long it could go on for. We kind of got a taste of it just last year, which feels like an eternity ago, with the COVID and trying to get the season started. So and then Rob Ranford doesn't inspire with any confidence whatsoever. So
No.
hopefully he's the worst commissioner I've seen, and I thought Selig was bad, but Manfred is just an all-time low. But anyway, hopefully both sides can resume activity. I mean, as long as let's say the lockout ended in, January or whatever, which doesn't really seem super likely, but I don't know. That doesn't seem like too much lost time. People can sign. I mean, we saw how many players were signing right before the lockout, so they could
Hmm.
obviously sign as soon as it ends. But I think what gets me is potential momentum. Now, I guess that's kind of debatable because players can talk amongst themselves. Like, let's say a Marcus Stroman, who we're definitely going to get into. Let's say he was recruiting, a Carlos or a Correa. It's like that doesn't mean that those two couldn't still chat, for fun in the offseason on their own. They can't talk with teams, but um I don't know, it just felt like lost momentum in a way. Like now people are just gonna have to wait until the lockout ends and then whatever happens then. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, based on what I'm reading a lot, is that it seems like best case scenario. I mean, again, you never know, but it seems like best case scenario right now is February. And February is right when pitchers and catchers report, and then, a bunch of other people tend to report early to spring training. And, you usually get the whole squad there by, mid late February. It's, when
Mhm.
you get the pitchers and catchers first. I mean, if they resolve it in mid February, then you could kind of pull things together fairly quickly. But I think if we go into March, it's probable that we might see some regular season games shaved off the season because, as you alluded to earlier, there's still a ton of free agents out there that have got to sign, and they're going to want to
Mhm.
work through that. And then you got to get spring training together. And I mean, sure, you can have a shortened spring training. I mean, look at the 2020 COVID year. It was basically just,
Yeah.
workouts at your own stadium and then a few exhibition games. So you can have a shorter spring training, but you got to have something. So I feel like if you go into March, that's when we start seeing the threat of a shaved down season. Now, let's say they get it done in early March and you end up playing most of the schedule. Okay, fine. But I mean, if you go beyond that, I mean, there's no doubt if you get into mid March, then you're definitely going to see some games missed. And then you get to late March. And then, yeah, I mean, it's hard to be optimistic about it being resolved quick because there are just a laundry list of things that need to get resolved. And I mean, you see the reports all the time. It sounds like they weren't even close on anything.
No.
So there's a lot to figure out here. And, I wish I could say that I was confident in a CBA coming together, within a month or two, but I don't see any scenario how that happens. I don't.
Yeah, the players are mad about the last CBA that they agreed to, and they want what they want, and so we'll see how it resolves itself. Hopefully it doesn't cut into the season itself. But what's your projection? Like, when do you think that do you think that we'll have opening day the normal time that we should have it?
I don't want to say I'm certain it won't, but I feel like I'm kind of 50-50 on it.
Hmm.
There's part of me that thinks they're going to want to get this put together. Both sides are going to want to get this put together. And, obviously, the owners have held a lot back from the players, and, the players have the right to be angry about certain things. But,
Yeah.
it's in everybody's best interest to get playing as soon as possible and get the CBA figured out. But, if one side doesn't like the other side, the reality is that they're not just going to budge on the first try. It's going to take a while to budge on certain things. And I think another thing that we as baseball consumers have to think about too is how is this going to affect what happens with some of the rules? I
Hmm.
think it's pretty set. I mean, I'm going to go ahead and bet there's going to be a universal DH. And look, if universal DH is one of the biggest changes, so be it. We're going into these other concepts of choosing your own wild card opponents. I think that just gets way too crazy. And 14
Yeah.
teams in the postseason, that's a little ridiculous. It really is. I like the idea of a more NFL type setup where it's a little more seeding based and your wild card teams play maybe a 3-game series, and your division winners get like a first round bye, if you want to call it that. That I'm okay with. And maybe even if you wanted to implement some NFL tiebreaker rules in it. So, if you have a wild card team and the last wild card spot is two teams that have the same record. It goes based on head to head, like you would see in the NFL. I'm okay with all that. But when you're getting into 14 teams and you're getting into choosing your own opponents and
Yeah.
any other of the crazy rules, I just that's just too much. You're making way too much change. And you know, I do understand one thing. I will say this really quick. You watched the World Series, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
You saw it. I think a lot of baseball fans who love baseball can agree those those World Series games felt like an eternity. Each
Oh yeah.
one, 5
Yeah.
plus hours.
Yeah.
And I was never in favor of a pitch clock,
Mhm.
but as time goes on, 5 plus hour baseball games, even as someone like me who loves the game, even my attention weighs a little bit with games that long that are 9 innings. I mean, obviously if it was an extra inning game, that'd be another thing if it was intense, but all
Yeah.
these actually, these regular games in the World Series, and I know commercials don't help, but they are going so dang long.
Mhm.
That's not an easy thing to fix, but I don't want them to tinker too much with it. They had the runner on second rule, and they did away with that. They just had it the 1 year, but
Yeah.
I'm curious to see how many of these rules actually are implemented when it happens.
Yeah, I am too. I'm sure, like you said, the inevitable seems to be the DH in both leagues. I don't know, expanding the playoffs, which I guess I can live. I mean, yeah, I can live with the DH. I guess I can live with the expanded playoffs. I would rather not expand the playoffs, but I saw something like they wanted to have like I think it was what the best record would have a bye or something like that. So like the NFL. I mean, adding the seventh team. And I will say, like in the NFL, it just seems like it's so watered down. Like when you have a team like the Bears at what are they 4-7, technically in the hunt,
We're
or
one
like
game
the
out.
yeah, right. I feel like in baseball, I don't know that it would feel as watered down because we saw teams like Seattle just miss the playoffs. So you could have 90 win, like legit really good teams just miss the playoffs, and in this case, maybe they'd make it. But I would
And
rather
baseball's a
not.
little more fluky. I mean,
Yeah,
you get into that last wild card spot, you get a few lucky, unlucky breaks that could change everything.
yeah, for sure. So I mean, yeah, I guess that if they want to do that, that's not the worst thing. And I don't know, pitch clock, I get it too. the game is so long. What's funny was I was watching like an old, just going down like a YouTube rabbit hole, and it was, I don't know what year it was. Maybe it was like '03, '05, I don't know. And they were talking about games back then, in that specific year, games were actually shorter by like 20 minutes. And I'm thinking, what the heck happened? Because, it's always seemed like it's been a long game. It used to be like Yankee Red Sox games would be uh, 4 hours anyway. Now it's almost any game, it seems like, especially in the playoffs, like you said, with the World Series this past year. So, yeah, I don't know. But wasn't there a rule that they tried to institute like a couple years ago where batters could not step out of the box or whatever, but they don't really enforce that.
No, no, they don't. And you look at maybe some of those games from 15 plus years ago, and you could look at a number of reasons why those games are a little shorter. One, it might just depend on who's on the mound, how much time they take in between pitches. Another thing you could think of is you're seeing all these strikeouts. And when you're seeing strikeouts, you're seeing some lengthier at bats. You got to get to 3 strikes, where I think there was a time where more pitchers were contact oriented, so you had more
Yeah.
balls in play being put in play more often. So if you're getting quicker outs with balls in play, that might shave a little time too that can accumulate after a while. And I also think too, it doesn't help that, when you have national telecasts of the World Series, commercial breaks are getting longer and longer with more advertising. So
Yeah.
obviously that adds on to everything about it. So yeah, I mean, like I said, these World Series games, they just felt like they lasted forever.
Yeah. It's funny too. 2016, I was not thinking about the time, or if I was, I didn't really care because I was invested in a specific team.
Oh
And
God, no, no,
yeah,
no.
yeah, it's like I get it though when you're watching a game that you're not really invested in that specific team, you're just watching the game to watch it. And especially taking into account like the time of night that the game is playing out, whether you have school or work the next day, or even if you don't, and it's just like 11 p.m. and you're like in the seventh inning, it's like, man, like let's go, like we need to just get through this. But I know that they're never going to change, obviously, the start time just because they want to maximize the profit potential in terms of sponsors and all that stuff.
Yep,
But
yep.
I don't know, it's just I don't know. But yeah, I get it. It's just the NHL games are like 2.5 hours. And if now like college football, NFL games can be long, but I don't think people care about the pace of play with football.
I mean, it's pretty much the same thing. You line up, you take the
Hmm.
snap, you make the play, you line up, you take the snack, you take the play. I think where if there's ever any spots where NFL fans are frustrated over pace of play, it's either one, the fact that there's now commercial break after almost every play now or every possession,
Yeah.
or there's a ton of penalties. But that's kind of at the mercy of the refs and the rules. Whereas if you're playing a football game and it's a drive, it's a long drive by a team, you're not going to commercial and you're not seeing a lot of penalties. That long drive where you eat up a bunch of yards, that eats up a lot of time pretty quick. I mean,
Yeah.
the Thanksgiving game, when the almighty Chicago Bears beat the almighty winless Lions, they won that game with an 8.5 minute drive that lasted the rest of the game. And you realize, wow, this offensive drive started with over 8 minutes to go. And all of a sudden, the clock's being winded down to 1 second and they're kicking the game winning field goal. That makes it go by very quickly. And it's funny because you really don't have much actual action in terms of the length of an NFL game. You take the
Yeah.
snap, the play happens, it's over. Then you take the time to line up, and then you take the snap, and then it's over. It's really quick. Where baseball, there's a lot of in between time, but different plays have different lengths. So I feel like baseball at the end of the day is the game that gets scrutinized for pace of play far and away more than any other sport.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so talking about the off season so far, like literally the off season now with the blackout or the lockout rather. But um, yeah, so I don't know. I kept thinking about, I liked how players were signing so fast. Now, obviously, it was because of the lockout coming, but I kind of wish that it was always like that without it
Me
having to result in a
too.
lockout because it's just fun, honestly. I mean, look
Mhm.
at the NHL, NFL, NBA free agency where guys will sign like as soon as the clock hits, maybe not midnight, but like noon or that first day. People are
Yep.
signing, they are ready to go. And in baseball, it just doesn't play out like that. And I don't know. There's probably lots of different reasons, but I'm guessing it's probably because, like, in the NHL, or at least one of the reasons I'm thinking is just because of the salary cap, and teams are just trying to like get their guys and figure out who they can pay and all that. But um, yeah, I don't know. It's always fun. Now I know like the winter meetings is a huge thing, and that's canceled now, of course. But um, that's always a fun time where a lot of things go down, lots of rumors, and I guess this is what the second because last year it was I think online only or it wasn't in person obviously. So
Yeah,
um
2019's last time we had a normal winter meetings.
and honestly, I can't even 2 years ago, it seems like forever ago at this point. It's hard to even remember what the winter meetings was like then, but I mean, I've been to one, which is really cool. But as far as just this off season so far, so like, lots of big fish still out there, but also a lot of big fish have already signed, like, Marcus Stroman, for instance, coming to the Cubs on that 3-year deal. So I know the rumblings kind of started with that. I don't know, it wasn't that long, honestly, before he signed. But I mean, you didn't expect the Cubs to really make any impact signings, did you?
It's kind of it was kind of a weird journey in terms of my consumption of what I thought, what I was consuming in what the offseason was and what I thought the Cubs were doing based on what I was seeing. And there was a plenty of time where I thought, wow, they're really not going to do much of anything. I said going to this offseason, they should spend money because they do have money. And Marcus Stroman was on the top of my wish list. I said, go out and get this guy
Yeah.
because you and I both know that regardless of how much money the Ricketts were allowing Jed Hoyer to spend, Max Scherzer was not going to come here.
Mhm.
Kevin Gossman was probably not going to come here. I was looking more at the Marcus Stroman, Robbie Ray, even Carlos Rodon types,
Mhm. Mhm.
but we knew that Scherzer was not going to be an option. Scherzer wanted to be on a team that was going to be very, very aggressive. And, as time went on, the Cubs weren't doing anything. It kind of felt like, well, they told us before this offseason started that they were going to be aggressive. They were going to use their resources. And then they're thinking, okay, here we go again. I reading about Marcus Stroman and how they kind of scrambled to get that signing and Jed Hoyer kind of saying we had to adjust our strategy a little bit. I can't help but wonder. I don't know if there's any truth to this. It's just a theory. I can't help but wonder if the very vocal displeasure from the Cubs fan base kind of forced them to do this or made them a bit more aggressive about it. Because I think it's very possible that the Cubs were going to look into spending money on some guys post lockout and they were just trying to wait on as long as they can. And then they realized, you know what? Our fans are kind of pissed off. All these guys are going. We better get on this, or else who knows what's going to be left by the time the CBA expires. So maybe they maybe they just didn't have that sense of urgency and they thought they were going to be able to wait and see what happens after the CBA, but you just alluded to it. A lot of these guys were flying off the board. And we're not just talking about mid-tier guys. We were talking about some of the top dogs. We were talking about Scherzer, Robbie Ray, Kevin Gossman, Marcus Semien, uh, Corey Seager. They were all going. So I feel like they kind of said, you know what? Before the CBA expires, we need to get this done. And you know what? Props to Jed Hoyer for getting this done because it was right
Yeah.
near the buzzer when he got this done.
Yeah, so you mentioned Kevin Gossman. I mean, like, did you think that, he's getting over 100 million? Did you think that Marcus Stroman would be getting over 100 million though? I mean, he's getting was it 70? I wrote the figure down. 71 over 3 years, opt out after 2. So it's a kind of I like it the deal for the Cubs because it's only 3 years, so they could always whether they resign him or whatever they end up doing, however this team plays out over the next year or two. Um, they're not like it's a team friendly deal, but also for Stroman, he can opt out after year 2. He can get a big deal somewhere else later on or with the Cubs again. So, were you
Hmm.
kind of surprised by the figures?
Yeah, I was expecting a little more. Obviously, the AAV is really good for Stroman. That's some really nice cash he's going to be collecting every year. But I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I was expecting about 5 years, honestly,
Yeah,
somewhere in
right.
that ballpark.
I figure like 5 for
Yeah,
100 something. Like,
yeah,
I think the MLB trade rumors predicted like 5, 110 or whatever, something like that. So I was a little surprised by 3. But yeah, I don't mind when it's maybe a shorter term deal, but higher AAV. I mean, I know it's, Max Scherzer really just cashed in, obviously, like you knew he would, but I mean,
he's
it
also
makes
what,
sense.
38 years old.
He's like 37, I think. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense. But even in general, like you never know how guys are going to age or what's going to happen anyway. So
They can
it's
drop
kind
like
of,
a rock. When you have a
yeah,
lot of miles on your arm, they could drop like a rock at any time.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, I don't really mind those deals anyways. But yeah, it's kinda surprising to me too that Stroman has never pitched at Wrigley Field, so that's obviously gonna change very soon, but it's kinda surprising 'cause he's been in baseball. Well, I guess it's not too surprising. He was with the Blue Jays for a while. He was only with the Mets for you throughout 2020, he didn't even pitch against the Cubs, obviously, and then in 2019, you only play him, 6 times a year, so you can see where I'm thinking back now, I guess it's not like it lined up too often for he would be able to pitch against or at the Cubs really, so he'll finally get
Yeah,
to cross that one off.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's really nice to see how much he's embracing the fan base in the city
Mhm.
and how he's showing so much excitement to be here. And now he's recruiting Carlos Correa.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, exactly.
it's like, wow. Like, here's this guy who just signed right before this lockout, and he's already like embracing Cubdom. Like, he is
Yeah.
all in on this. And when he says that he looks at a team that's going to be trying to win, and you clearly look at their current roster, and that's not going to win you a division, but
Right.
it makes you wonder what Jed Hoyer is telling him. I
Mhm.
mean, here's something that speaks volumes to me.
Mhm.
If you look at some of the guys that Jed Hoyer has recently acquired, whether it's Cody Hoyer, Nick Madrigal, or Marcus Stroman, they're all saying really good things about like the vibe around the Cubs and how, they feel like, there's something to be had here. It makes you wonder what Jed Hoyer is really telling these guys and what kind of plan he really has. The thing with Jed Hoyer is he's not Theo Epstein in terms of
Yeah.
media relation. You are
Right.
not going to find a better executive, in my opinion, in
Mhm.
sports that is more transparent and just brute out honest with what they're doing than Theo Epstein was. So,
Oh, yeah.
Jed Hoyer isn't making his plan quite public like, Theo Epstein did. He made it very clear from day one what the plan was. And it might have some Cubs fans on edge because we want to know what's going on, but maybe they really are going to use resources. Maybe they are really going to be aggressive once the new CBA comes in. Maybe they will get a Carlos Rodon. Maybe they will make a push at Carlos Correa. And maybe these prospects, this very deep farm system that's very raw but full of potential, maybe they really do believe that there is going to be some legitimate talent coming up through that system over the next few years. This is clearly not a linear rebuild. And, what I mean by that is it's not you're growing one core and they're all pretty much coming up at the same time, like the Epstein era. You're going to be bringing in a lot of established assets and building blocks and then kind of building and develop accordingly to mesh with them. And I think that's why they keep saying this rebuild is not going
Mhm.
to last very long because you're not going on that more straight linear path that the Epstein rebuild did, because that was a complete teardown, complete
Yeah.
resurfacing. And Jed Hoyer even alluded to that. He said, we have the building blocks in place or some building blocks. So you have an opportunity to add more once the CBA ends. So it's it's a time where my optimism is cautiously optimistic, but I think if you look at the way the organization has taken a turn and where they might be heading, I think there is reason for some hope.
Yeah, so obviously, Stroman's a big piece for the rotation. You wrote about the Cubs rotation now. I think you mentioned that Stroman is probably the best pitcher, at least in terms of maybe, stuff, power, whatever. Ground ball guys. So, the infield's got to be on their toes. And I mean, I like I like a guy like Nico Horner, and you know, you just gotta hope that he's healthy. How do you feel about first of all, how do you feel about the rotation? You wrote about it, so I mean, you said Hendricks, like we all know, had kind of a down year, but I think does deserve the benefit of the doubt. And he was a guy, like I didn't know what the Cubs were gonna do, so I wasn't expecting any kind of impact signing necessarily. And so Stroman obviously changes that narrative a little bit, but also I don't think they're gonna trade a guy. Like I thought they might trade a guy like a potentially. I didn't even think they would. I thought, if they're going to trade guys, Hendricks would fit that mold potentially, but they're not gonna trade him. They're not gonna turn around and sign a Stroman and then trade a guy like Kyle Hendricks. Now Wade Miley, a 1 year deal, right? So who knows at the deadline. But um, I thought last year the rotation could be good and wasn't the best. So how do you feel about this one now?
Yeah, I mean, let's be real. The rotation last year was really, really bad. You had Kyle Hendricks have the worst year of his career. You had Zach Davies had a really down year. And I know a lot of Cubs fans will just want to shit on Zach Davies, period. But you know what? You look at
Mm,
what Zach Davies had done in the past. He's had a number of really good years, really, for what he is. He's had some solid years, I should say. Not really good, but he's had solid years. And last year, he was just, oh, it was awful. But you look at it now and you say, okay, you don't have that fireballer that misses bats yet. You don't. I mean, that's just a fact. But Marcus Stroman brings a very good, just a very good, solid arm in there that, he might not blow it by you, but 93, it's not like he's throwing 87, 88. He's throwing 93. He's got movement on his pitches. He's got a wide arsenal of pitches. So he's not just throwing fastball slider. He's got a number of pitches he can throw at you to get outs. And, he doesn't miss a lot of bats, but it's
mhm.
not like he barely misses bats. He can strike out a guy, you know, decently.
Yeah,
He's not a full contact guy. He's not a Max Scherzer or a Lance Lynn or anything like that. But I'm going to give Kyle Hendricks the benefit of the doubt. I think he deserves it. He's
oh
been
yeah,
so consistently good.
yeah,
Really bad last year, but it was 1 year. I'm not ready to panic on that yet. Wade Miley, solid. Nothing spectacular, nothing flashy, solid. I think the biggest debate is what is Albert Alzolay going to be?
yeah.
He deserves one more shot in the rotation, I believe. He's got the stuff. 90, 95, 96, hard slider. He just needs to locate and execute on some of these pitches better. Maybe he has to work more on a changeup, adding another pitch more frequently, like he's been trying to do last year. I think it's very possible he just ends up being a reliever. And okay, if that's the case, fine. But
Yeah.
at least he's a guy that can miss bats in that rotation. It's just you've yet to see the consistency with him because we saw last year there were some starts he looked really dang good, really dang good.
Yeah.
And then there were other starts where he would look lights out the first 3, 4 innings, and then things would just kind of go off the rails in the fifth,
Um,
sixth, or seventh.
yeah. Yeah.
So you just want to try to figure something out there. And then, Alec Mills, he's just going to be your fifth starter that's going to get ground balls. And, I think as time goes on, when, the minor leaguers play, hopefully we'll see Jordan Wicks work his way up because I would love to have him in the rotation by 2023. But the rotation as it stands now, it's not spectacular. It's not going to be league leading. It doesn't have the
Yeah.
firepower of the Mets or the Dodgers, but it's going to be a heck lot better. Should be a heck lot better than it was last year if healthy and they're all playing at the top of their games. Very
Yeah.
solid, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. So, like I said, kind of talking about like the infield, like Nico Horner at shortstop. Maybe you have Correa somewhere on the infield at some point. But
Fingers crossed.
um, yeah. So yeah, I mean Stroman is, I mean, at least he's trying to recruit guys, and like I said before, just because there's a lockout doesn't mean he can't talk with a Correa or whoever. They can do whatever they want,
He's
but
not tampering, right?
no, I mean, I don't even think you can classify it that right. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how that works because I know teams and players can't talk in any way or agents or whatever. So I mean, assume a player could text a player, hang out with a player. I don't know. I don't know because I get how it seems easy enough and innocent enough, but um, just like I know an agent or a GM and a potential free agent couldn't like meet up for dinner. I'm assuming, right? So I don't know, but yeah. So how do you feel about the lineup? I mean, right now, you're talking about uh wisdom and guys that had a nice 2-3 months maybe in the after the trade deadline and things like that. And but like Nico Horner again, what do you think about him? I mean, he's got to be healthy. He just seems to be ending up on the IL quite a bit over the last year and change or so at this
Yeah,
point.
yeah. And it stinks because if you watched him play last year when he was healthy, I loved what I saw. I get it. He doesn't have power, but the fact that he's able to slash the ball on a line from foul pole to foul pole, really like that. And he made some nice defensive plays at second. Obviously, second's not going to be his position. That is strictly Nick Madrigal. Nick
Yeah.
Madrigal is really, when you think about it, the only piece on the infield that's set in stone. When you
Yep.
when you think about it, I
Yep.
mean, it's going to depend on what if they do bring Anthony Rizzo back? And maybe you say, you know what? If we have Anthony Rizzo back and there's going to be a universal DH, then you could kind of platoon between DH and first base with
Yeah.
Rizzo and Frank Schwindel based on matchup or whatever. Obviously, you would love to have Rizzo's glove in there every day, but if you're going to spare his back, then you're going to want to DH him a little bit. That's just to keep
Yep.
his back from tightening up because every year that flares up, and when you're a tall guy with a bad back, it's only going to get worse as time goes on. But that's a big if. And third base, who the heck is going to play third base? I mean, look, I have a lot of respect for Patrick Wisdom. He's got great power, but I don't think you could depend on him being an everyday guy. I think he's a bench platoon guy going forward, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I just
Yeah.
don't think he's going to be in there every day. He had a very high strikeout rate, but when he did make contact, the ball really exploded. And give Wisdom this too. Even if he struck out a butt ton, like an alarming ton, he could still put together a good at bat. We saw him, even if he struck out, foul some pitches off, get to 2-2, 3-2, make a nice lengthy at bat. He can do that. But right now, Wisdom would probably be at third base right now because I don't know who else you'd really put out there right now. Chris Bryant's gone. David Bodie's injured. If David Bodie wasn't injured, you'd probably have him out there opening day, but he's hurt, so that's not an option. Um, yeah, I mean, Baez is gone. He can't play there anymore. He's with Detroit now. Uh, it's just there's so many holes in this lineup. That your everyday players are going to be guys like Madrigal. As of right now, obviously, a lot can
Hmm.
change. Madrigal is going to be there every day. If there is a universal DH, I think you'll have Wilson in there a lot, and you can rotate DH and catcher with him and Yan Gomes, which I
Yeah.
think is good for Wilson Contreras too to not catch so much and get that wear and tear. So,
Right.
if there is a universal DH and you got Yan Gomes, I still think you'll be able to get Wilson Contreras in there more times than not. He might not be up on opening day, might be some time, but eventually Brennan Davis is hopefully going to come up. And if Brennan Davis comes up, he's going to play all the time. He's your number one prospect. You're going to want to get him some playing time. And until another move is made, Frank Schwindel's kind of earned that first base spot. That's your guy right now. They don't get
Yeah.
anyone else at first base. That's your guy.
Yeah, also, quick note on Stroman. One thing I was thinking about was the fact that he's been pretty durable. He makes about 30 starts a year
Mm-hmm.
minus like 1 year, a few years ago. But yeah, he seems to be pretty durable in that regard. And yeah, so Jan Gomes, 34, 2 years, $23 million deal, I believe it was, or was it
Mm-hmm.
$13 million deal? I'm trying to
13
remember.
million over 2 years.
I thought it was 13. I wrote 23 for some reason. So anyway, $13 million deal. So uh yeah, so were you surprised by not necessarily getting a catcher, but maybe paying for a guy like that who's been a starter For the most part, Wilson Contreras always likes to put up the cryptic tweets. He had the airplane tweet. I don't know if you saw it. You probably heard about it, but
Yeah, yeah.
and then he apparently liked the tweet about potentially being Yadier
He's all
Molina's.
it's that's just him having fun. That's trolling. I don't buy
Yeah,
anything more
I
into
think
that.
so. I think you're right, but he's a guy that people are wondering they're going to extend him, or are they going to trade him? So, are you looking for them to extend Contreras, or where are you coming out with that, and how the Jan Gomes thing will play out, or not play out, but just you know, I would say, like, assuming Contreras is on the team, he's obviously your starter and Jan Gomes is your backup. But like you said before, you can get Wilson off his feet a little bit more by letting Gomes play behind the plate. So, yeah. So, what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, honestly, I thought the Jan Gomes move was a really smart move because Miguel Amaya is probably going to miss the entire season.
Mhm.
And with that happening, Wilson Contreras was the only catcher on the 40-man roster. And we knew that they needed to go out and make a move for a veteran catcher. And Jan Gomes was the best one available, honestly. I mean, you could have gone the route of bringing back like a Robinson Chirinos or a Jose Lobaton, but
Yeah.
those guys are like third catchers at this point in their careers. Jan Gomes, 34 years old, for a catcher, pretty good offensive numbers. He could hit 15 home runs. He could hit 20 doubles, bat around 240, 250. For a veteran catcher, I take that. And he's, pretty solid behind the plate. He's nothing spectacular, but he'll get the job done. He'll get the job done behind the plate. He's a reliable guy you can count on. They needed it desperately. You can't have one catcher, and you want your catcher depth to be able to produce at least a little bit. So I think Jan Gomes was the most ideal move you can make. And I wrote an article about them bringing him here, and I said, "Oh, what's going to happen with Contreras?" But my real feelings towards that situation are, I I I don't see this as we need to draw a conclusion that Wilson's gone. I don't.
Mhm.
Because let's say you trade away Wilson and you don't get a catcher in return. Okay, then you're back to having one catcher again.
Yeah.
What? Obviously, you could bring in a cheap veteran to back him up, but I don't see why you would want to trade Contreras right now. He's going
Yeah.
to be your home run hitter when you think
Yeah.
about it. When you look at that whole lineup, the guy you would trust probably to hit a home run more than anyone is him. I mean, the only other power guys you have on your team right now, you got Ian Happ, you got Patrick Wisdom. If you want to throw Frank Schwindel in that based on the few months he had last year, sure, but Wilson Contreras is your number one power guy. You're surely not going to get any power from Hayward or Madrigal or Horner. Um, so you need that bat that can produce regularly and hit it out of the park regularly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, he is your offense at this point. So, looking at free agents that are still out there, you mentioned Rizzo. Where do you think he's going to end up? Chris Bryant. I think it's funny that the Rockies are involved, or at least supposedly interested in Bryant. I don't see that happening at all. I mean, I'm sure they
I don't
are
either.
interested. I don't think why would he go out there? I do think Seattle could be a fit because they were a
I do
sneaky good team
too.
last year. They're on the West Coast. They're close to home for him. They're kind of a quiet. I don't know if he's looking for a team that is quote unquote out of the spotlight, but I kind of get the feeling that he wouldn't mind something like
Yeah.
that. Maybe he goes to Philly and he's there with Bryce Harper. What do you think Brian ends up doing?
Yeah, I think Philly and Seattle makes sense. I'd like to see him go to Seattle. Obviously, I'd love to have him back on the Cubs, but I'm obviously not counting on that. I think
Mhm.
Seattle would be a really nice fit for him because not only would he bring an all star presence to that up and coming team, we've seen how he can play so many different positions. He can play third, he can play left, he can play right, he could play center.
Yeah.
You can plug him in where you need to go. And I think that would be really good for Seattle. Obviously, like you mentioned just a second ago, if he went to Philly, he'd be reunited with his Vegas buddy Bryce Harper. But I I'd like to see him go to Seattle. I would really like to see him in Seattle. If you would have asked me few months ago, I thought, oh, the Giants are going to definitely try to bring this guy back, but it
Yeah.
doesn't look like they're going to.
Nah.
So I feel like Seattle and Philly would probably be two of the best options for him, unless a third team kind of emerges out of nowhere and says, hey, we want Chris Bryant. What if the freaking Rangers are like, ooh,
I was
Let's
just
find
about to
some
say.
more
I
guys.
was just about to say they've already got 2 shortstops, so one's not gonna be playing shortstop. But yeah, can you imagine if Texas threw their money at Chris Bryant next? I mean, geez, talk about remaking an infield and an offense in you know,
Brian Seager
one off
Simeon.
season.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, so, I think the Dodgers could be in on the Bryant thing as well. I mean, it's hard to count on a team like LA in terms of money. They're a team that's trying to win. So the way I look at the Dodgers is they're still a very good team, win now type of a team. But I kind of wonder if there may be, how it seems to go in baseball when you have a team that's been at the top for so long and then they get knocked out by somebody. And it's like, yeah, that team should still be really good. And they start to maybe go downhill a little bit. And, I'm thinking about just like recent history, like teams like the Tigers, when all of a sudden they got knocked out of the playoffs one too many times. And then they were doing it over again. And then, I'm trying to think of a team. Anyway, you get the point. You get what I'm trying to say. Not to say the Dodgers are done or anything like that. They might win 110 games next year, but
Probably will.
after the way though that they lost Seager. Who knows if Kershaw? They lost Scherzer. I mean, even Bauer, for God's sake, is out of the rotation at this point.
Yeah,
So, I
yeah.
mean, I mean, they're kind of having to readjust a little bit. I think they'll be fine ultimately,
I
but
mean, luckily for them, they're always able to produce assets from the farm.
yeah.
Just when you think they're thin at a position, they'll bring up a guy and look, he's great.
Yep. Yeah, so I mean, I think the Dodgers are always involved with anybody, but
Of
yeah,
course.
Philly, Seattle. I don't take Colorado. Like, why? Like, what's Colorado going to do? Sign him and trade him to St. Louis in 2 years? Probably.
Oh, don't even put that in my mind. Oh,
Well, it's okay. The Cardinals still have like a 10-year and plus World Series drought. So, anyways,
longer than the Cubs.
exactly. So, Rizzo. Do you think he goes back to New York? Do you think he goes somewhere else? I don't think he's going to the Marlins.
Yeah, I could see him going back to New York, and I feel like he is the one Cub that could come back. It would be him. I don't know how serious the Cubs would be in bringing him back, but I still could see it. But I feel like New York would want to try to keep him if they
Yeah.
could.
Oh
And
yeah.
I think if they make him good enough offers, he could go back to New York. The only reason I'd see him going to the Marlins is because of his hometown connection in
Yeah.
Florida. So that would be an option. And, again, maybe there is a guy or a team that just emerges out of nowhere and surprises everyone and signs Rizzo. I mean, you never know. I can confidently say it won't be the Cardinals, but just had this kind of thought. What if the Brewers signed him? Could you imagine?
That would be pretty crazy. That would
Yeah,
be that would be crazy. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Let's see. Correa, you think he's going to the Cubs? It sounds like the Cubs or Yankees were the top. I mean, at least according to reports that they're the top two teams that are in on him, but too much, who knows? So, what do you think about Correa?
You know, for 99.9% of this offseason, I didn't even entertain the idea of Cray and the Cubs because it felt
Hmm.
impossible.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I'm still not betting on it happening,
Hmm.
but I feel like there actually is a possibility that that could happen. Very small. I'm not counting on it. I'm not betting on it. I'm not putting any money on it. But I feel like the Carlos Correa to the Cubs dream went from impossible to maybe not quite as impossible over what
Yeah.
happened the past few days and some of the things that we're hearing and signing Marcus Stroman and him actively recruiting him.
Yeah. Yeah. What is Stroman's like, aside from his pitching? What if one of his best strengths is just being the recruiter? I mean, that can't be a bad thing.
No, of course not, especially in a time like this when you're trying to kind of go through a transition phase and you're trying to retool and bring in some more building blocks. Being a recruiter and being an effective one would not be a bad thing whatsoever. Not at all.
Yeah, so yeah, it's kind of a different feeling I feel like now. I mean, it's one player that's well amongst the offseason acquisitions for the Cubs. Stroman's kind of the big name, obviously. So Now we just gotta wait for the lockout to end and see what happens, see where Correa and everybody else will end up.
Yeah, and I mean another big free agent that's still on the board is Nicholas Castellanos, and I'm very
Mhm.
curious to see where he goes. I know there are a couple teams that are interested in him. Um, I wanted them to do everything they could to bring him back. I just don't think he's coming back to the Cubs. I
Yeah,
don't see it.
probably not. What about Kyle Schwarber? I mean, he had a huge season last year.
Yeah, he did. He did. And, if he stayed in Boston, I'd say good for him because I felt like he fit very, very well there. I
Yeah.
thought like that was Boston was the perfect environment for a guy like him. Now, they get the universal DH in the NL. I think that gives you a very good reason to bring Kyle Schwarber back. You don't have to worry about him in the field. You could do
Yep.
whatever you want in the outfield and have him DH. And if there just comes a day where you need him to play left, he's played there before. It just wouldn't be very often you would need that. So I
Yeah.
think that would really increase the desire to bring Kyle Schwarber back if there was a DH. If not, I think Boston was a really nice fit for him. Though I will say, the South Side, that'd be a nice fit there too for the White Sox to have a guy like Kyle Schwarber.
Yeah, with the White Sox. So what do you think they're gonna do this offseason? They signed Kendall Graveman, but uh I mean, do you see any big acquisition over there? I mean, they kind of need to they're in their window. They got to kind of capitalize
Yeah.
on this, this upcoming season and, next season for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's pretty clear they don't want to go over the luxury tax and they don't want to spend the massive money. But I think a lot of it is going to hinge on what happens with Craig Kimbrell. I think if they
Yeah.
trade him and they get rid of a good chunk or most of that 16 million he's going to be making next year, that frees up a lot of space for them. Uh, I still think that if you're going to go after a power hitter and not break the bank like on a guy like Nick Castellanos, I think maybe a Michael Conforto would be a way to go. He's not a high average super OBP guy, but he can hit the ball out of the ballpark. And, it's funny because I thought these guys were going to be the big home run boppers, but, you saw in the postseason and towards the end of the season when the Sox were kind of coasting towards October, the power
Yeah.
really went down. And I get it. Eloy Jimenez and Luis Robert, who I think is going to be the best player in baseball. You didn't see them hit as many home runs like you thought they would. Robert still hit in the postseason. He was just hitting singles.
Yeah.
And the White Sox got their hits, but they were singles. Whereas the Astros were getting everything. They were getting home runs, singles, doubles, whatever. So if you're looking for a guy that can just really focus on popping the ball out of the ballpark, you could go with a Kyle Schwarber or a Michael Conforto. But Michael Conforto, I feel like, will plug more of a hole just to because they need a solidified right fielder, in my opinion. And I think
Hmm.
he just could plug him right in right field. What they're going to do for second base, I think, is a really good question. If your answer is going to be Leury Garcia every day, I don't think that's a good solution. Leury Garcia is your platoon utility guy that you have for depth and filling in places. He's perfectly adequate at that. But if I were a White Sox fan, I wouldn't want 135 games with Leury Garcia at second.
Nope. Yeah, so it's gonna be fun to watch the well, I really just can't wait for the lockout to end like everybody else so that we can get back to the normal off season. I mean, right now it's not a huge deal just in the sense that we wouldn't have baseball anyway, but there's just the lingering question of how long it's gonna last and will they be able to solve this before it does really matter because you don't want to lose any games, even spring training, because not only does that impact the teams and players, but you just don't want that to happen. You just want it to be a normal year. And, after COVID and watching how baseball couldn't figure that out before their seasons ended up starting, and you just don't want it to linger. And I mean, I just can't wait till they get a new commissioner, but I'm not sold on who the next commissioner would be, if they would be any better. They can't be much worse than Manfred, but I thought
No.
Selig was bad and Manfred's been even worse. So
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It really is. And, What's good for baseball fans is we'll at least have minor league baseball to support this summer no matter what. So there's something comforting about that.
So before we go, any final thoughts, parting wisdom thoughts from you?
Well, I just, as we look ahead to the Cubs and assume that this lockout's going to end and assume they're going to have a season and everything will get back on track, I feel like the Cubs have an opportunity in 2022 to really establish their identity and who they are. They might not be the World Series contender in 2022, but it is such a crucial upcoming season for this team because not only are you trying to bring in established building blocks, as I mentioned earlier, you are working to get a lot of those top prospects in the farm system moving their way up, getting Brennan Davis to the big leagues, getting Braylon Marquez back on track, continuing the development of Caleb Killian, Owen Casey, Reginald Preciado, Nelson Velasquez, who just won AFL MVP, some really young guys like James Triantos, or one of their big shiny toys, Christian Hernandez, who's getting comparisons to Alex Rodriguez and Manny Machado. Even if you know that you're not going to have some of these key top prospects up in 2022 at the big league level, it is a crucial year for so many of them to play on another level. Get Reginald Preciado and Owen Casey a full season, in the farm system outside of rookie ball. Get another year of professional experience for Christian Hernandez and, just work on a lot of these guys because these prospects are going to be important. The value that they could potentially bring to the Cubs on the field and the value they could potentially bring as trade chips. And I think one of the reasons Jed Hoyer really tried to stock up on some of these types of prospects is to build them for trade value. I think there's going to be a lot of value in the farm system that they're trying to develop that they are going to use as trade bait because you need a deep farm system not only to bring up players, but to have ammo to make trades too. That's going to be very important. We saw it in the Epstein era. You traded Gleyber Torres for Aroldis Chapman to get a title. You traded Eloy Jimenez and Dylan Cease to get Jose Quintana. Those big trades happen, and you're going to want to make sure your system is deep and continually producing talent. And I think when Jed Hoyer went out and established an infrastructure underneath him, bringing in Carter Hawkins as GM, bringing in members from the Rays to be your hitting coach, your assistant GM coming from the Astros, one of your head scouts coming from the Brewers. Those are all franchises that really did a good job over the years in developing and scouting talent. And the Cubs need to catch up on doing that because they really fell behind. And I think Jed Hoyer hired those personnel for those reasons, for developing and scouting. So it's really important that they develop while the building blocks are being put into place. You don't want them to happen at different times. It wouldn't be ideal. You want the season to play on the big league field and all the minor leagues so they can develop too, so you can really go forward here. Again, I'm not going to say that it's all going to work out peachy. I'm not predicting anything or what the exact timetable is, but I think we got to stay here and just try to get through this because I do think they are trying to work towards something that could be good. It's a new era, so let's see how this goes.
Yeah, hopefully they can find their identity, and I don't know. I have no expectations, obviously, for next year. Even if they sign Carlos Correa, I say this now, and then they sign him, and then I'm like, oh man, maybe they could be a playoff team. But honestly, just get the building blocks in place, and obviously, maybe you could spur the, you could speed up the rebuild before or retooling or whatever you want to call it, based on what you do this offseason. Guys play well next year. They're healthy. Maybe they're very productive. You add on to that, and then before you know it, you're back in the playoffs and making noise. So we'll see.
Absolutely. And, you know, uh, it's funny. You look at the NL Central and you're like, all right, the Cardinals got Steven Matz, solid move, not much else. The Brewers just traded away Jackie Bradley Jr. to get Hunter Renfroe. That's a pretty good move. it looks like the Reds are waving the white flag again. Seems like that's what they like to do. They like to have a year or two of being competitive, and they're like, all right, time to get rid of it all. We were able to get Wade Miley for nothing,
Yeah.
claimed off waivers. It looks like they're
Mhm.
interested in trading Sonny Gray and Luis Castillo. So they could be selling off and starting a rebuild of their own. And the Pirates are still, they got that great farm system now. They got a lot of
Yeah.
assets, but they're not going to be competing for anything next year. And, with the Brewers, they're probably the favorite, in my opinion, to win the NL Central. I feel like their pitching staff is still going to be lights out. You never know when you have a bunch of hard throwing laser beams like the Brewers do. You never know. You never
Right.
know if one guy falls off, and stuff can happen. And I still don't think the Brewers offense is all that good. So if their pitching staff isn't quite to where it was last year, then they are beatable because you're going to be in every game if they're not scoring a lot of runs. I'm not saying the Cubs are going to win the division next year. I wouldn't put money on the Cubs winning the division next year at all. All I'm saying is that it's not like they're playing in the NL East or the AL East or the NL West for that matter.
Yeah, I mean, the Braves at least showed though that you can be an under 500 team most of the season and then get hot and win it all. So you never know. That's why they play the games.
Yes. Now, I do want to say something quick about that. Thank you for bringing that up. There were people saying, well, what if the Cubs did that? They were a similar spot to the Cubs. The Braves were more talented. Regardless of their record being similar to the
Oh yeah.
Cubs at the time of the trade deadline, the Braves were way more talented. The Cubs did not have the starting pitching staff to go on a run in October. They played behind a Brewer team that was miles ahead of them, and the
Yeah.
Cardinals got red hot. It just that was not going to happen to the Cubs. They had to make the decision. They couldn't stand pat. They had to sell. They had to make that decision, and they made it. And they could have lost everybody for nothing, and they probably would have lost everybody for nothing if
Mhm.
they didn't do that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
you can't compare the two teams. You
Mm-mm.
just
No
can't.
way. Oh yeah, for sure. They had to make those moves like we talked about before. They had to do what they did. Now, you can debate the fact that things could have gone differently the years leading up to 2021 so that they maybe would have had to do what they ended up doing at the deadline. But once this season started and guys weren't signed, yeah. And like Baez, I think got a good deal with Detroit. Obviously, he turned down more than what he could have gotten with the Cubs, and probably same for Rizzo and maybe even Bryant, who knows. But I think the Baez deal that he got, I think that was a good that seems like a Javi Baez type of deal. I don't know if you expected more or less money, but he got a really good
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah, I thought it was a solid deal. I thought it was for Detroit. I thought it was. I thought maybe there was a point he could get a little more, but
Mhm.
you look at what happened last year. He really had a resurgence with the Mets. There were a lot of struggles when he was still a Cub. So yeah, I think overall it's a pretty good deal for Baez.
Yeah. Well, that's all I have got. Again, I'll give you anything else that you want to add before we go.
No, I don't have anything else to add now. I hope that we can do this again soon, and maybe we'll have some news on how things are progressing. I don't know, but we can never run out of Cubs topics to talk about on this show. So, you know, we'll make stuff work. That's for sure. Even if there's no Cubs baseball for a while.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, let's do it again soon. And yeah, I guess that's all we've got. So we'll catch you all next time.
Peace.